up for the trophy presentation is now underway. That will be happening in just a few minutes.
Aryna Sabalenka simply stumbled into an unexpected horror. The FBI is collecting screenshots of the tennis powerhouse's alleged inappropriate behavior and dirty techniques. Tennis officials are no longer able to overlook the growing number of accusations. What began as rumors about dubious behavior on the court has grown into a major controversy that might ruin everything Sabalenka has established. Whether or not she crossed the line is not the question that everyone is asking. It concerns whether she will be able to withstand what follows. This is what I'd like to know. Do you believe that elite athletes get away with actions that would result in suspension for anyone else? Let's go back to the beginning of this catastrophe. Nobody decides to ruin their entire career over a tennis match when they wake up one morning. It took some time for this scenario to blow out. It developed quietly and slowly in that perilous area between hubris and confidence, where champions occasionally get lost. Aryna Sabalenka has devoted years to establishing herself as one of the most formidable rivals in women's tennis. Strength, mental toughness, and an energy that made opponents uneasy even before they took the floor. She was doing more than just winning games. She was in control of them, using ground strokes that left opponents reeling and serves that sounded like bullets. You crushed dreams. Her ascent to the top seemed obvious, even organic, like witnessing a natural force take its proper position. The problem with staying at the top, though, is this. You get paranoid as a result. Suddenly, every young player appears to be a threat. Every grievance seems unique. Every setback seems to be the start of the end. And you start doing whatever it takes to uphold that image once you've made being the most terrifying player in the room your entire identity. The Filipino phenomenon Alexandra Eala, who wasn't expected to be an issue this early, enters the picture. Before challenging the status quo, she was expected to learn, grow, and pay her dues for a few years. But Eala never received that memo. Her wild enthusiasm made veterans uneasy as she blasted through competitions. There was no doubt, no respect for reputation, simply the unwavering conviction that she was one of the finest, and people like Sabalenka were shaken by that notion. Dramatic altercations or public feuds were not the beginning of their tension. It began with minor details that fans observed but were unable to fully articulate. A handshake that was too brief by 0.5 seconds. Every time Eala's name was mentioned at the press conference, her body language screamed displeasure, and her response felt colder than necessary. Nothing overt enough to draw attention, but enough to raise questions about whether something more profound was going on. Then their match, the one that would alter everything, came. From the time they entered the courtroom, the mood was off. Sabalenka appeared to be preparing for a battle rather than a tennis match, as she walked in with that recognizable stone-faced veracity, her shoulders taut and her mouth clenched. With a carefree smile and a youthful enthusiasm, Eala bounced in, eager to show that she belonged. It was nearly unpleasant to observe the sharp contrast. The first set proceeded very smoothly. Precision against power, hunger versus experience, a collision between two entirely distinct styles. However, in the second set, something changed. Something that would subsequently lead to charges, inquiries, and a public relations disaster that Sabalenka's team is still trying to quell. Sabalenka began extending her practice routine, bouncing the ball 15, 16, and 17 times while deliberately and methodically making Eala wait for her towel. At first, it appeared to be typical gameplay, the kind of rhythm disruption experienced players employed to confuse new players. However, it continued to get worse. The intervals lengthened. It got chilly on the stairs. The timing seemed too deliberate to be accidental. Then came the mid-rally moment that caused social media to go into overdrive. Sabalenka grunted in a way that seemed out of step with the play. It was just as Eala was about to make contact, not during her own shot. A brief interruption that might have been unintentional. However, 2 points later, it occurred once more. On the other hand, Eala's body language instantly transformed. Confusion, annoyance, and the unmistakable tightness of someone trying to stay composed while feeling deliberately unsettled. At last, Eala held out her hand to the chair umpire. It was a non-aggressive, non-dramatic gesture that conveyed the idea that something wasn't quite right. The crowd began to mutter as the umpire nodded and gave a gentle warning about the speed of play. When cameras captured Sabalenka's response, that murmur grew into something more. A quick, subtle, yet unmistakable smirk in slow-motion replay. "I know exactly what I'm doing," is the type of expression. At that point, the game shifted from being about tennis to something much more repulsive. Social media didn't wait for formal declarations or inquiries. In a matter of minutes, videos featuring unsportsmanlike behavior and dirty methods were making the rounds. Filipino supporters, tennis enthusiasts, and casual onlookers, everybody had an opinion, and the majority of them were negative regarding Sabalenka. The delayed serve was visible from one perspective. The misdirected grunt was captured by another. A third froze on the sneer that would come to represent the dispute. However, the narrative takes a darker turn at this point. The change that resulted in FBI accusations. Because there was audio hidden in all those widely shared videos that supporters think captured something much worse than gamesmanship. During a changeover, Sabalenka was allegedly heard murmuring something beneath her breath on a courtside microphone. Eala was the target of something that unsettlingly sounded like a racist insult. The audio quality was awful, distorted, ambiguous, and susceptible to misinterpretation. Online viewers, however, don't wait for clarification. They make decisions based on emotion and context. Additionally, individuals filled in the blanks with the worst possible meaning because of everything else that occurred throughout that match. All of a sudden, this was more than merely dubious strategies. This concerned possible hate speech from one of the biggest names in sports. The similarities to Coco Gauff began practically right away. In order to find evidence that Sabalenka had a history of treating opponents of color differently, fans started going over historical films in search of trends. After losing to Gauff, they discovered a tight handshake. Sabalenka became contemptuous when questioned about up-and-coming Asian and black athletes during a press conference. Moments that appeared harmless at the time but suddenly appeared suspicious due to public indignation. It didn't matter if any of this was true proof of racial bias. The story had developed, solidified, and proliferated much quicker than any formal investigation could keep up with. Hashtags took off. Hashtag #StandWithEala was popular in several nations. Despite being founded on accusations rather than verified facts, Investigate Sabalenka acquired popularity. Tennis officials made ambiguous claims about looking for possible sportsmanship infractions in the film, steering clear of details, but taking no action to quell the storm. Then the FBI angle surfaced, the allegation that turned this from a sports issue into a possible federal case. Rumors circulated on social media and tennis forums that someone had formally complained to the FBI about Sabalenka's alleged remarks, alleging they were hate speech that went beyond the law. Nobody was confident whether the FBI was genuinely investigating this, whether it had any legal merit, or whether any of this would lead to charges. But the mere hint that federal authorities might be involved rocked the tennis community. Sabalenka's group entered a state of emergency. Her social media accounts are silent. No press conferences, nothing more than a succinct, lawyered response that meant nothing. The goal of that quiet was to prevent more damage. Rather, it made her appear guilty in the eyes of the public, because people assume the worst when you're accused of something so serious and you remain silent. Eala, meanwhile, managed the circumstance with incredible poise. She shared a single, straightforward message. Respect is a component of the game. I hope everyone keeps it in mind. 8 words that conveyed both everything and nothing, acknowledging the debate without contributing to it, preserving her dignity while refusing to confront her accuser. Sabalenka's quiet seemed much worse in contrast to the reaction. The opinions of former players were divided between those advocating for accountability and those defending competitive intensity. Every frame of the game was analyzed by commentators. Legal experts disagreed over the possibility of federal charges for suspected on-court remarks. For weeks, the story dominated tennis news, overshadowing rankings, tournaments, and all other tennis-related events. The confluence of several problems was what made this situation very hazardous. Unsportsmanlike behavior is contrary to gamesmanship, respect for young stars versus veteran privilege, racial dynamics in a sport with a large white population, social media's ability to convict before an official investigation is finished. Every aspect fueled a fire that didn't appear to be going out. In the end, Sabalenka resumed competition. However, she was unique. Careful restraint had taken the place of the swagger. Her preservation routines became substantially shorter. The fierce stare-down subsided. No one could determine with certainty whether this was intentional image rehabilitation or real change, but anyone who paid attention could see the change. If the FBI inquiry ever took place outside of online rumors, it never led to any formal charges. Tennis officials examined the video, made general remarks regarding the standards for sportsmanship, and discreetly concluded the case without making any conclusions or imposing any sanctions. However, the damage had already been done. No amount of victory could fully restore Sabalenka's damaged reputation. Eala, meanwhile, gained more credibility after the issue. Among younger players, her ability to remain composed under duress became legendary. Her refusal to participate in mudslinging while defending herself turned into a lesson on overcoming hardship. Not only did she make it through the ordeal, but she also used it as a platform to raise her fame over what any tournament win could have accomplished. Months later, patterns began to emerge regarding the officiating of matches involving Sabalenka, which was the truly fascinating aspect. The umpires appeared to be more aware of the tempo of play infractions. There were stricter calls for time infractions. Whether this was genuine prejudice against her or simply increased awareness on the part of officials concerned about another controversy. As a result, Sabalenka found herself performing under greater scrutiny than in the past. She deserves it, according to some fans. The scandal exposed personal shortcomings that required attention. Others said she was being unfairly singled out and that her career was being defined by a single poor match. As always, the reality most likely resided somewhere in the complex middle, where people make mistakes, deal with the fallout, and perhaps grow from them. There is no denying the episode altered discussions regarding professional tennis behavior. The debate between crossing borders and gamesmanship became increasingly complex. Whispered observations on racial dynamics in the sport gave way to candid conversations. It became untenable to overlook social media's ability to influence narratives and demand accountability. For Sabalenka, winning games was not enough to move further. Rebuilding trust needed proving that the behavior in that match was an exception rather than a pattern, through deeds rather than words. She would never be forgiven by some people. The instant those videos became viral, their thoughts were made up. Most would watch and wait, allowing time and behavior to dictate their judgment, while others would give her the benefit of the doubt because they believed in forgiveness and second chances. Whether genuine or not, the purported FBI inquiry was more important than a single player's legal issues. It represented a shift in society where athletes' actions on the court are scrutinized in ways that earlier generations were not. Stars could no longer act however they pleased with little repercussion, replaced by a time when public accountability arrived quickly. This story demonstrates how your reputation in contemporary sports can deteriorate more quickly than it can be restored. Sabalenka found the hard way that in the absence of respect, intensity breeds foes rather than legends. Eala demonstrated to us that poise under duress speaks louder than a fight. Public opinion creates the story that accompanies you forever, but the court will always be the ultimate arbiter. If you thought this breakdown was useful, hit the like and subscribe buttons to ensure you never miss the controversy that everyone is discussing.